I'm Bianca, a lawyer who rose after the man I loved disregarded my worth. My name is Bianca, I'm 39 years old, and I'm a corporate attorney based in Chicago. For privacy and professional reasons, I'll be using pseudonyms for the individuals involved in this story. For over 10 years, I've poured my heart and soul into my work, building my career step by step in a field that isn't exactly easy for a woman. Though I've never been on TV or graced the cover of a magazine, I've earned a reputation across the state as a competent, straightforward, and sharp attorney. I used to think I had it all, a career to be proud of and a peaceful home with a man I believed would always be my rock, Dylan. We met at a financial conference. He was 6 years older than me and managing a fast-growing chain of electronics stores at the time. Dylan was charming, well-spoken, and knew exactly how to make me laugh. It didn't take long before we got married. I still remember our wedding day. As we stood by the reception table, he whispered in my ear, "You just be you, I'll handle everything else." It sounded romantic then, but now I see it as a quiet warning I was too in love to recognize. In the early years of our marriage, Dylan adored me. He loved bragging to his friends that his wife was a lawyer, though he often exaggerated the details for drama. I didn't mind at first, I thought he was just proud. But as time passed, I began to see something more troubling. He didn't truly respect what I did. Even though my income was more than enough to live comfortably, Dylan often made sarcastic remarks like, "You're a lawyer and still don't make $200,000 a year? What's the big deal?" Well, after I came home from a stressful day, he'd casually joke, "I still don't get why you bother with all those boring lawsuits and disputes. Why not switch to something that actually brings in money?" I kept quiet. Not because I didn't know how to respond, but because I was trying to protect the peace in our home. But that silence eventually became his excuse to belittle me more and more each day. I started to notice how Dylan constantly tried to make me feel smaller, as if I should be grateful just to be his wife. Once, during a dinner with his family, I casually shared a story about a case I had just won, one that moved my client to tears. Dylan smirked and said, "That's impressive and all, but I still make twice what you do, Ms. Lawyer." The table went silent. I gave a polite smile to gloss over it, but inside it felt like a bucket of ice water had just been thrown at me. That sting didn't fade after dinner. It stayed with me, quietly simmering until the day everything truly unraveled. Dylan began staying out more and more, claiming he had conferences, partner meetings, or was inspecting new branches. The cold, lonely evenings without him grew more frequent. I wasn't blind. A woman knows when something is wrong. But that still wasn't the worst part. Everything truly fell apart the moment I discovered the truth. His business trips became increasingly suspicious. Some weeks, he'd only be home for 2 nights. Anytime I asked, his answers were curt. "You're busy too, aren't you? Always out handling your cases." I didn't argue, but inside, something kept urging me to look deeper. Not because I wanted to catch him, but because I started to feel utterly invisible. One Saturday night, I was in my office going through legal files when the landline rang. Hardly anyone used that number anymore, only a few old friends or trusted colleagues. I picked up. It was Maya, an old college friend who knew both me and Dylan. "Bianca, I hope this isn't weird to ask, but is Dylan really on a business trip right now?" My heart skipped a beat. "Why do you ask?" I said, trying to stay calm. "Because I saw him yesterday in Lakeview, with a young, red-headed woman dressed like a model. They were hugging in front of the Claremont Hotel parking lot." Lakeview was supposedly where Dylan planned to open a new branch next year, but at this moment, there were no events scheduled there. After hanging up, I sat frozen for several minutes. My hands were shaking too much to even flip a page. That numb, sinking feeling was worse than anger. How could I, a lawyer who handles family disputes for a living, let my own marriage fall into something so cheap, so cliché? That night, I dug out Dylan's old laptop from the bookshelf, the one he had practically forgotten after switching to a new one a few months earlier. And I knew one thing for sure: someone like Dylan never remembers to wipe their data completely. In less than 15 minutes of searching, I came across a private browser window that still had some history saved. I found a second Facebook account under the odd name Mark Dawson. The profile picture was Dylan, dressed in golf attire, standing next to a young, red-haired woman in a vibrant red silk dress. In the comments, she called him baby, and Dylan responded with a heart emoji. I froze. I, the woman who thought she was holding together a marriage worth saving, turned out to be the one who had already been replaced. I didn't cry. Maybe because there were no tears left after years of being belittled? I printed those photos and messages, slipped them into an envelope, and sat down to wait for Dylan like a judge, ready for the final hearing. When he walked through the door at 10 p.m., the unfamiliar scent of cologne clung to him and made me nauseous. He dropped his keys on the table without even looking at me. "You're still up?" I didn't answer. I simply slid the envelope across the table toward him. Dylan frowned, picked it up, and looked through it. In less than a minute, the color drained from his face. "Explain this, Dylan," I said, my voice calm, almost chilling. He looked at me, not with guilt, but with indifference and annoyance. "Honestly, I figured you'd find out sooner or later." I clenched my fists in my lap. What about my dignity? The promises, the hopes I carried for over 10 years? Dylan stood up abruptly, voice tense. "Have you ever taken a good look at yourself? You're always about work, courtrooms, law, always wrapped up in divorce filings, disputes, legal paperwork. Did you ever stop to think about your husband's feelings?" I sighed. "So now your excuse for cheating is my career? Dylan, I fought for this marriage. You didn't." He shrugged, smirking. "At least she knows how to care, unlike you, a successful woman with no soul." Then he said something that nearly made me lose control. "I'm filing for divorce, and this time I'll marry someone who actually deserves me." I stared him straight in the eyes, voice colder than ever. "Then you better get ready, Dylan, because you've just gone up against the person you underestimated the most, and the only one capable of making you regret it for the rest of your life." After that confrontation, Dylan disappeared for 3 days. He didn't call. I didn't text. No words were needed anymore. On Tuesday night, I had just turned off the lights in my office when there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Todd, Dylan's best friend and business advisor, the same man who once promised during our wedding toast to protect our love through any storm. Now he stood in front of me, holding a beige folder, his face filled with awkward guilt. "Bianca, I'm sorry. Dylan asked me to deliver this to you." I took it from him, nodded gently. "I understand. Thank you for not just leaving it at the door." Todd looked like he wanted to say something else, but didn't. He turned and walked away without looking back. When I opened the folder, there was nothing surprising inside. Divorce papers. Below them was a sloppy handwritten note from Dylan. Typical of him, cold and arrogant. "I've hired a lawyer, you should do the same, and move out by the weekend." I sank into the chair, gripping the paper with trembling hands. Not because I was shocked, I had mentally prepared for this, but because of the sheer audacity. The man I once trusted, the one I had held hands with through hard times, now treated me like an unwelcome guest in my own home. I laughed. A laugh choked by heartbreak. The next day, I walked into my law office with a resolve I had never felt before. I wasn't a divorce lawyer, but I knew the law. I knew the game Dylan was about to play. And more importantly, I knew that if I didn't stand my ground now, I would lose everything. Not just the assets, but my own sense of worth. I called Nina, a former colleague who specialized in family law, the same person who once joked that if I ever got divorced, she'd personally make sure I win big. Now it was time to turn that joke into reality. After I gave her a quick rundown, Nina sighed. "I had a bad feeling about that guy from the start. But wow, this is something. Do you have enough evidence?" I pressed my lips together. Messages, photos, browser history, even the second Facebook account. And one more thing. Do you remember the prenup I asked you to draft? Nina's eyes widened. The clause about splitting assets if there's infidelity? Oh my God, Bianca, you actually kept it? I have the notarized copy, with Dylan's original signature. We both sat in silence for a moment. Not out of sadness, but because clarity had finally returned. That afternoon, I emailed Dylan's lawyer, a man named Rick, with a brief but clear message. I, Bianca Lancaster, have received the divorce papers initiated by your client. I will only communicate through legal representation. All assets will be divided according to the legally binding agreement signed by both parties. Less than 10 minutes later, Rick responded with a meeting scheduled for the next day at his office. I agreed, and I made sure to attach scanned copies of the prenup and a few pieces of evidence, enough to deliver a warning from a distance. That night, I packed up my belongings, not because I was kicked out of the house, but because I chose to leave. That house, once a warm home, had become nothing more than an empty shell filled with the scent of betrayal. I moved into a small apartment in Old Town, the same place I lived in during law school. It was where all my dreams first began, and now it would be where I rewrote my life. I was no longer the woman waiting for someone to love her the right way. I was Bianca Lancaster. And this time, I was going to teach Dylan a lesson, using the one thing he had always underestimated: the strength of a woman who's been hurt but refuses to fall. After settling into my old apartment in Old Town, I spent the entire Sunday organizing every document related to my marriage with Dylan: the prenup, financial records from the past years, and all the blatant evidence of infidelity I had gathered. I knew that if I wanted Dylan to pay the price, I couldn't rely on emotions alone. I had to strike where it hurt most: his company. Dylan never truly understood why I insisted on signing a prenup before the wedding. He assumed it was just one of those overly cautious lawyer habits. He even laughed when I asked to add a specific clause. If either party commits infidelity, the other is entitled to 50% of any business, joint or private, currently owned. At the time, Dylan just shrugged and said, "I've got nothing to hide," then signed without even reading it thoroughly. Now I realized his blind confidence was my greatest advantage. On Monday morning, I arrived at Rick Evans' office, Dylan's legal representative, for a face-to-face meeting. The office was on the 19th floor, overlooking Lake Michigan. Exactly the kind of flashy, upscale place Dylan would have chosen. Rick was a man in his early 50s, calm in demeanor but sharp behind the eyes. When I walked in, he stood and extended his hand. "Ms. Bianca Lancaster, it's a pleasure to meet you. I believe we can resolve this matter civilly." I offered a polite smile. "I hope so too, Rick, but before we begin, I think you should take a look at this." I pulled a folder from my handbag, set it on the table, and gently slid it toward him. Rick opened the folder. The first few pages were certified copies of the prenup, complete with signatures and legal stamps. The rest included screenshots of messages, intimate photos of Dylan with the redhead, and a hotel booking history in Lakeview, all arranged in chronological order. He didn't say a word for the next 5 minutes, just the soft rustle of turning pages and eyes growing steadily more focused. Finally, he looked up. "I don't believe Dylan shared all this with me." I met his gaze, my voice steady. "I figured as much. But you're a smart attorney, Rick, and I trust you're smart enough to understand exactly where your client stands in this game." Rick nodded. His expression shifted from confrontational to cautious. "If what you're saying is true, we're in serious trouble. Very serious." I adjusted my collar and tilted my head slightly. "I'm not here to threaten. I'm here to make it clear that I won't give up any of my legal rights. I have the evidence. I know the law. And I have one very clear goal: to protect my worth. Something your client deliberately tried to destroy." Rick remained silent for a few seconds, then exhaled slowly. "I'll need time to speak with Dylan. You'll hear from me soon." I stood up, polite but firm. "Thank you. But please remember, any move to delay or deceive, and I won't hesitate to take everything to open court. That afternoon, just as I returned to my law office, my phone rang. The number wasn't saved, but I knew exactly who it was. I picked up. Hello? Dylan's voice came through, sharp and agitated. What the hell did you say to Rick? I let out a slight chuckle. Actually reminded him that some things can't be bent, not even with money. He growled. Bianca, you don't have the right to ruin my career over some petty jealousy. My voice cut through, cold as steel. No, Dylan. I'm claiming exactly what the law entitles me to. If you didn't want to split the company, then you shouldn't have signed that clause. If you didn't want consequences, then you shouldn't have cheated. I hung up. Later that afternoon, I received an email from Rick. The next meeting had been postponed to the following week to give the client time to revise his documentation. I knew they were scrambling, but I also knew this. The more Dylan resisted, the deeper he pushed himself into a corner. Because this time, I wasn't just the ex-wife. I was the legal opponent he never saw coming. 1 week after my meeting with Rick, and clearly after a heated argument between him and Dylan, I received notice. Dylan had changed attorneys. The new guy was named Matt Jacobs, with an office in River North, a high-end area known for rising young attorneys. This time, I chose to meet face-to-face. I wanted to see for myself who Dylan thought could take me on, and I wanted to make sure Matt knew exactly what kind of battle he was walking into. Matt's office was on the 11th floor of a sleek glass building. The waiting area had light wood floors, a coffee table stacked with Forbes Under 40 magazines, and a portrait of Matt himself, tall, slicked-back brown hair, a confident smile. Too young, too confident, and far too unguarded. When I walked in, Matt stood up and extended his hand. It's Miss Bianca. Great to finally meet you in person. Dylan's told me a lot about you. I shook his hand, offering a measured smile. I'm sure he has. We sat down. Matt opened a folder in front of him, clearly energized. I think we can get this divorce wrapped up quickly and smoothly as long as both parties are cooperative. I smiled faintly and tilted my head. Oh, I hope so too. But before you go any further, I think you should take a look at a few things I brought with me. I reached into my leather bag and pulled out the original prenup, neatly sealed in a protective folder. Then came a large envelope containing screenshots, messages, and emails from Dylan's secret account. Matt stopped writing and frowned. What is all this? I laid everything out in front of him, my voice calm to the point of cold. Evidence of Dylan's affair, and the prenup clearly states that if he cheats, I have the right to 50% of the company's shares. Matt pushed his chair back slightly, his expression now guarded. I wasn't given any of this information. I nodded, unsurprised. Dylan has a habit of hiding the truth when he thinks he can talk his way out of it. But in law, the truth doesn't vanish just because you refuse to acknowledge it. Matt picked up the prenup and flipped through it as if looking for a loophole. I let him review it for a while before speaking. I personally drafted that agreement, and I was present at the notary's office on the day it was signed. Every clause is valid. If you need verification, I can provide the notarized copy, email correspondence, and third-party witness statements. Matt let out a long breath and gave a small nod. Wow, Dylan was definitely not honest. I'm sorry, I thought I was handling a straightforward divorce. I gave a small smile. If it were simple, I wouldn't have lost more than 10 years of my life. Matt closed the folder and set it on the table. His tone was no longer arrogant, but measured and thoughtful. So, what do you want? I looked him straight in the eye, my tone firm. I want what's mine. Nothing more, nothing less. Half the company shares. As agreed. I don't want to drag this out, but I won't concede a single dime if he tries to weasel out. Matt nodded. I understand. I'll speak with Dylan. Based on what you've provided, I think he should brace himself. I stood up and gathered my documents. And if Dylan thinks hiring a young attorney will scare me into backing down, maybe you should remind him. I'm Bianca Lancaster. I don't back down. That afternoon, I received a single-line text from Dylan. "You think you've won, huh?" I didn't reply. I just took a screenshot of the message and filed it away. Because I knew. People who have the upper hand don't send messages like that. Only those who know they're losing do. Less than 24 hours after my meeting with Matt Jacobs, I received a short email directly from him. "Dear Miss Bianca, I'm writing to inform you that I will no longer be representing my client Dylan Anderson in this matter. All related documents and legal responsibilities have been returned to him. Sincerely, Matt Jacobs and Co-Office." I wasn't surprised. Matt was smart. An experienced attorney won't walk into court just to be made a fool, especially when the opposing party has a binding contract and irrefutable evidence of infidelity. I filed the email under self-inflicted wounds and got back to work. Not even an hour later, my phone rang. This time, it was Dylan. I exhaled, thought for a few seconds, then picked up. "Hello?" His voice came through, icy and furious. "What did you say to Matt? Why did he drop the case? What game are you playing, Bianca?" I gave a light chuckle, just sharp enough to sting. "I'm not playing games, I just handed him the whole truth. If Matt walked away, that's because his client wasn't honest. You're trying to destroy my life, Bianca. I won't let you steal my company. You think you're so clever? No one's going to back you forever." I pressed my lips together, resisting the urge to laugh out loud. "I don't need anyone to back me, Dylan. I only need the law, and right now the law is backing me." On the other end, Dylan screamed, "I'll hire someone better than your damn name in this industry." I replied calmly, each word landing like a blade straight into the last bits of illusion he had left. "You've already tried hiring 3 lawyers. All of them dropped you after the first meeting. They didn't quit because of me, Dylan. They quit because you're not the kind of man worth defending." I hung up. This time there was no trembling, no tears, only clarity. In the following days, Dylan tried contacting law firms all across Chicago, from the big-name offices to solo practitioners. But every road led straight into a wall called Bianca Lancaster. I didn't block anyone from taking his case. I didn't make calls or issue threats. But the legal circle in this city, they talk. And when someone hears about a divorce case with a valid prenup, stacks of infidelity evidence, and the opposing party is me, most of them say one thing: "Sorry, I don't think I'm the right fit." A week passed. No one said yes. Then, on a quiet Saturday morning, I was sipping coffee on the porch when I heard a knock at the door. When I opened it, there was Dylan. Disheveled, dark circles under his eyes, and the perfectly styled hair he used to pride himself on was now messy from sleepless nights. I stood in the doorway, not inviting him in. "I thought we were only speaking through lawyers." He swallowed hard, hesitating. I haven't found anyone willing to represent me, and you know why." I crossed my arms, gaze sharp. "So what are you here for?" Dylan looked down at the ground, his voice soft. "For the first time since all of this began. Bianca, can we resolve this without dragging it out? You don't have to take half the company. You can take other assets, or I'll pay in cash. Please." I raised an eyebrow. "Cash? After you blew thousands on that redhead mistress? After you insulted me and threw me out of the house we built together?" He stayed silent, unable to respond. I continued, my tone now devoid of mercy. "No, Dylan. I'm not the kind of woman who gets shoved to the ground and then begs the one who pushed her. You signed the agreement. You cheated, and now you'll pay. Line by line, word by word." I shut the door. No more words were needed. From the other side, I heard a heavy sigh, then footsteps slowly fading away. There was no bitterness in me, only cold resolve. Dylan could yell, beg, or try to disappear, but he couldn't outrun the shadow of his own choices. Because Justice and the truth always find a way to make betrayers bow. After that last call, I thought Dylan would stay silent for a while, at least to regroup or plan an escape. But no, he chose to come back with a performance I never expected to witness. That morning, I was watering the plants on my balcony when I heard the doorbell. Part of me already knew who it was, but when I opened it, I was still surprised. Not because it was Dylan, but because of what I saw in his eyes. No more anger, no more arrogance, only raw desperation. His shirt was wrinkled, his face unshaven, and the bags under his eyes looked like he hadn't slept in a week. Dylan Anderson, the man who once commanded boardrooms and wowed investors, was now standing at my door, head bowed, like a man completely lost. "We don't have to do this, Bianca." His voice was hoarse, like he was choking down 100 things he wanted to say. I didn't move, still holding onto the door frame. "What are you trying to say, Dylan? That it was all a misunderstanding? That I'm overreacting?" He shook his head, faster than I expected. "No, I was wrong. I know I did something terrible, but splitting the company will ruin me. Everything I've built, it'll all be gone." I gave a faint smirk. "Just like the way you destroyed this marriage. You didn't think about that when you cheated, did you?" Dylan stayed silent. And then something happened that no one could have predicted. He dropped to his knees, right at my doorstep. "Please, Bianca, I'm begging you. You can take the money, the house, anything, just don't take half the company. I've already lost everything she left me. The shareholders lost faith. No lawyer will touch this case after they find out who you are." I looked at him, not with anger, but with a coldness so sharp it felt like ice seeping into my chest. "Let me remind you of something, Dylan. I didn't do anything to you. You led yourself here. You cheated. You signed that prenup with the arrogant belief that you'd never get caught. And now, when the law demands accountability, you come to me for mercy?" His head dropped, voice breaking. "I was wrong. I know that, but I can't lose the company. You know that, don't you? It's everything to me." I sat down on the doorstep, keeping my distance. "And what was I to you all those years, Dylan? The woman who earned money and protected the family's name while you played around with girls half your age? I'm not a shadow, and I'm done being the one who silently endures." He looked up, eyes red. "I've cut her off. I just need one chance to fix this. I'll start over, I swear. Just don't take the company." I let out a cold chuckle. "You don't need a chance, you need control. And I'm sorry, but I'm not a tool for you to hold on to your power." I stood up, calm but firm. "You can leave now. I have legal representation. If you have even a shred of dignity left, let the rest of this play out in silence and by the book." Dylan slowly got to his feet. Shoulders slumped like he had just lost the last thing holding him together. Before he turned to leave, he asked one final question, barely a whisper. "Bianca, if I had never cheated, would things have been different?" I looked him straight in the eye. "If you had never cheated, I wouldn't have had to become this strong." The door closed behind Dylan, but I knew another one had just opened in my life. A door that led to no more false promises. No more shadows of a man who once made me doubt my worth. Only me, the law, and the freedom I deserved. 3 days after his pathetic kneel at my doorstep, Dylan showed up again, this time unannounced, with no call or warning. He was simply waiting in the lobby of my office building, just as I finished a client meeting. He wore that old silver gray suit, the one he used to call his lucky deal closer, now wrinkled and lifeless, just like the man wearing it. As I walked out, he stepped forward, his voice quiet. "Bianca, just a few minutes, please." I checked the time. I had 15 minutes before my next meeting, but I didn't agree out of pity. I said yes because I wanted to see what someone like Dylan could still come up with to save himself. We sat at a small table in the coffee shop downstairs. Dylan didn't order anything, just clasped his hands tightly in front of him. His eyes were sunken and tense, to the point I barely recognized the man who once boldly declared he never loses. "I've lost almost everything, Bianca," his voice cracked. "But the thing I regret most isn't losing the company, it's losing you." I raised an eyebrow. Here we go again. "No, this time I mean it. I realize now the only person who stood by me when I had nothing was you. The only one who stayed up all night helping me fix presentation slides, giving feedback on pitch decks, that was you. The only person who believed in me when everyone else called me a dreamer was still you." I didn't deny it, yes. I had been all those things, but the past isn't a get-out-of-jail-free card for present betrayal. "And I'm also the person you cheated on, Dylan," I replied, my voice calm. "The person you kicked out of our home with a text, the one you once said wasn't worthy of a man as successful as you. I can't forget those words." He bowed his head in silence. I pulled a paper from my handbag, a copy of the clause in the prenuptial agreement Dylan had personally signed. "Do you remember this line?" I pointed to it. "In the event of infidelity, the offending party agrees to transfer 50% ownership of the current business to the other party." Dylan stared at the paper like it was a blade stabbing into the last shred of dignity he had left. "I didn't read it carefully when I signed." I cut him off immediately. "No. You signed it because you thought you'd never get caught. You believed I would always be the silent one, turning a blind eye. But you were wrong. And now? You're trying to make it right. Not for me, but because you want to keep the company." "That's not true." "It's exactly true." I emphasized every word. "If you weren't at risk of losing everything, would you even be here? Or would you still be vacationing with your mistress in Miami?" Dylan dropped his head. He had nothing left to defend himself with. "I'm not your backup plan, Dylan. I don't need love that only shows up when the other person is in crisis." I stood up, firm, clear. "I'm not coming back. Not out of hatred, but because I see it now. The man I once loved no longer exists. You traded everything for your ego, and now you'll live with the consequences." I turned away, but before stepping out of the cafe, I paused and glanced back. Last piece of advice, Dylan. Next time you want to save something, don't wait until it's already in ruins. That afternoon, I went straight to my attorney's office and signed the final agreement to transfer 50% of Dylan's shares to me, just as outlined in our prenup. There was no farewell party, no tears, no rose petals scattered on marble steps like in the movies. Just me, a woman who had learned to love herself before giving love to anyone else. The following month, our divorce was finalized. No last mediation, no court appearance. Dylan ultimately signed off on the division of assets exactly as stated in the prenup. He once brushed off as just a formality. When he signed, the usual calm was gone from his face. His hands trembled, eyes sunken, and he looked worn down. I didn't feel triumphant, but I didn't soften either. Because I knew this wasn't revenge, it was consequence. The mansion he once proudly showed off in financial interviews, it now belonged to me. 50% of the electronics company that once bore his name, now under my ownership. And the man who once believed he was untouchable lost it all to his own blind arrogance. I wasn't a woman who tore someone down to build myself up. I simply refused to let myself be stepped on again. And when the law recognized my rights, I accepted them with the clarity and professionalism any lawyer like me should possess. Dylan was different. Less than a month after the assets were split, he began to spiral financially. The debts he had quietly built up during his affair, luxury trips, designer gifts, lavish parties, all surfaced like cracks in a wall too long ignored. And in a tragically ironic twist, the red-hand mistress vanished. Rumors said she was now hand in hand with a young investor in Florida. Dylan called, texted, even showed up in person, but no one answered. From a man who had everything, he slowly sank into desperation. The company, now jointly run by me and the board, made a strategic decision: revoke Dylan's executive authority unless he could buy back his shares or prove legitimate management skills. That meant he no longer had a voice in the very company he had founded. I'm not the kind of person who holds grudges, but I do know this: forgiveness, given at the wrong time, only enables more abuse. My friends, both in and outside the legal field, some call me the coldest woman in Chicago. I don't bother correcting them. They weren't there when I was belittled for earning less than my husband. They didn't sit with me through the nights I clutched unsigned divorce papers praying he might change. They didn't know what it felt like to peel off broken fingernails one by one, still clinging to a marriage that had already rotted. I know, and I lived through it. I used part of my settlement to expand my law office, hiring 3 promising young female attorneys and launching a department focused on helping women in distressed marriages. Not everyone is as prepared as I was, but everyone deserves legal protection. I also bought a new home in the suburbs of Glenview, not too far from the city center, but peaceful enough that each morning I can brew my coffee, play soft music, and never have to see a single face I don't want to. What about Dylan? The last I heard, he was renting a small apartment near Uptown, getting by while trying to salvage his career, but with a major blemish on his financial record and a severely damaged reputation, no investor wanted to come near him. And perhaps that was the harshest lesson of all. A man can lose everything simply because he underestimated the woman who once loved him wholeheartedly. I have no regrets. There's nothing left to mourn. I lost a husband, but I found the strong woman within me. I let go of a fake marriage and started living an honest life. And most importantly, I proved that no one can take your dignity, unless you let them. People often say that after divorce, women either fall apart or shine brighter than ever. I chose the second path, and I've never looked back. Right after the divorce was finalized, I appointed Maggie Rains, a seasoned financial consultant, to manage the shares I had just acquired from Dylan. I didn't have time for boring board meetings or quarterly growth projections. I had done enough of that during 10 years living in his shadow. Now it was time to use what I rightfully owned to live. I sold the old mansion, filled with painful memories, and bought a new house in Lake Forest, about a 45-minute drive from Chicago. It has a clear blue lake, peaceful woods, and a discreet community where no one cares about who divorced whom, only what wine you're bringing to the weekend dinner party. The new home features a modern white brick exterior, floor-to-ceiling glass windows, warm-toned interiors, and a balcony facing the lake, where each morning I can sip cappuccino, read a chapter, and no longer glance at an empty chair beside me. My law firm also expanded. I hired 2 assistants, 3 young associates, smart, passionate women who once wondered if they could practice law and stay human in such a cutthroat industry. I told them, not only can you, you must. Because without that, the law is just a tool. We need to make it a support system. And they did just that. We didn't just help clients win cases. We helped them reclaim themselves after wounds no court document could describe. And Dylan? Rumors traveled faster than the collapse of his empire. After losing 50% of his shares to me and being removed from the board by the directors, he tried launching a new startup for smart home devices. But no investor trusted someone who'd already lost everything due to an infidelity clause. A few months later, I heard he was living in a small rental on the west side, had no car, and commuted by train. The red-haired mistress who was once the love of his life? Long gone, just like most relationships built on money. Silent, cold, and without a note. I didn't feel vindictive, but I didn't feel sorry either. Because Dylan didn't just lose a house, money, or a company. He lost his only real chance to start over with integrity. As for me, I took up meditation and painting. Each month, I donate a portion of the firm's profits to nonprofits that support divorced or financially abused women. One time, a woman trembling with fear walked into my office, clutching an outrageous marriage contract, eyes teary, whispering, "I heard you're the one who doesn't let women kneel for men." I just smiled, invited her to sit, and said, "We don't have to kneel anymore. We can stand and move forward." I no longer resent Dylan. I don't even mention his name when friends ask about the past. To me, Dylan is just a brief chapter in a long novel I'm still writing. My life now isn't perfect, but it's mine. No one controls it, no one dims it. And if you're listening to this with a heart broken by a breakup, let me say this: divorce doesn't end you. Sometimes it's the only thing that allows you to begin again and live as the strong person you were always meant to be. My story isn't just about escaping a toxic marriage. It's proof that women, no matter how betrayed or dismissed, can rise, reclaim their worth, and thrive. Divorce isn't the final chapter. It's the start of a new one. Bold, free, and fearless. Never let anyone define you by the weakness they project onto you. You have every right to rewrite your life. And this time, choose yourself first. What do you think about Bianca's decision? Was she too strong, or was it exactly what she deserved? Leave your thoughts below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt and life-filled stories about family.